Is the US mainstream media Islamophobic? I'm not talking about incidental Islamophobia, which would be when the media would sound Islamophobic without meaning to in unavoidable circumstances of normal news coverage, such as if the United States was at war with a Muslim majority country and the news media reported on soldiers of that country attacking US soldiers. It would sound Islamophobic without meaning to because it's describing Islamic soldiers attacking US soldiers, but it's not trying to sound Islamophobic. I'm not talking about incidental Islamophobia. I'm talking about, is the mainstream media Islamophobic in ways that are intentional? Is the US mainstream media trying to make the American public afraid of Muslims? Hello, I am the Knight of the Basilisk, and I care about having a mainstream media that is accurate about telling us about world events in fair and honest ways so that we, the American people, can make informed decisions when we go to the polls to vote. The first clue as to whether or not the US mainstream media is Islamophobic is to look at how the mainstream media has covered the protest following Israel's invasion of Gaza following the October 7th attacks. I've seen many articles in the US mainstream media that have decried the rise of anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas protests. That is, there are protests that the mainstream media itself has labeled pro-Hamas or anti-Semitic, usually in the title of the article. I find this very dishonest. The reason being, when you read the article, the dishonesty comes out. What the articles will do is they'll talk about how Jewish people feel about anti-Semitism, and then it'll talk about anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas protests. And then at the very end of the article, it'll describe what the protesters are actually doing. And when it's describing what the protesters are actually doing, there's nothing that's usually anti-Semitic. Sometimes there is something anti-Semitic. If there is an actual anti-Semitic protest, the mainstream media is fair to call it out. However, by the mainstream media's own admission, these protests are outcries against the Israeli military's killing of innocent civilians. People in the US mainstream media are entitled to their own opinions, like everyone else, but instead of expressing differences of opinion, they just slander the protesters. Why would anyone in the mainstream media do this? What are they accomplishing? I feel it's as if the mainstream media wants us to believe that Muslims, or anybody even sympathetic to Palestinians, are about to go on a hate crime spree against Jews. Maybe there has been an increase in hate crimes against Jews that have been perpetrated since October 7th. But if so, the mainstream media is free to cover that. However, I haven't seen a proliferation of such stories. Instead, they are using these protests as a means to get people to fear Muslims. Think about it. With the pro-Hamas label applied to these protests, doesn't it make it seem like there are large numbers of Islamist terrorists, or at least sympathizers to Islamist terrorists, congregating in large numbers on US soil? This will definitely get the American people to fear Muslims if it's convincing. However, I myself am not convinced. I believe the mainstream media is deliberately and intentionally being Islamophobic in these situations. Let's look at how the US mainstream media covered the November 2023 incident in which the US House of Representatives voted to censor Rashida Tlaib. Now, Rashida Tlaib posted a video on social media, and included in that video was a clip of protesters chanting a phrase, "From the river to the sea." It's an anti-Semitic slogan. And I realize that there are situations in which Jewish people use that slogan and it becomes Islamophobic or anti-Palestinian. But it still doesn't change the fact that when it's used in a context of Palestinians saying it, it becomes anti-Semitic. It being used for Islamophobic purposes does not dismiss or doesn't change the fact that it's also anti-Semitic. So the fact that Rashida Tlaib posted such a video leaves her open for attack, not only because it's an anti-Semitic slogan, but she was also censored earlier in 2023 for also citing or using that slogan. So she knew better. Again, this is low-hanging fruit to criticize Rashida Tlaib, and all the mainstream media had to do was cover the events as they occurred. Is this what happened? No. Instead, what they did is they went out of their way to distort the facts to make her look worse than she did when it wasn't even necessary. They're just stoking more fear against her anti-Semitic clip. I will cite articles in the description of this video that show how they have covered Rashida Tlaib's comments. I was not able to cite any articles about the U.S. media's coverage of the supposedly anti-Semitic protests because there's just too many of them. But for this one, I actually have articles to cite. So among the articles that I cite, the first one is from PBS. So what they do is they arrange quotes and fact to make it look like Rashida Tlaib herself said "from the river to the sea," at least when she was censored in early November 2023. Whereas when you read other articles, it's clear she didn't say this. She cited a video of people chanting this. The article I post from NBC News includes a fact that the lead Republican, Representative Rich McCormick from Georgia, closed off his district office because there were threats to his staff. That's what it included in the article about the censure of Rashida Tlaib. It didn't include what these threats were. It didn't include any facts about them. The article from NBC did not include why this was connected to anything Rashida Tlaib did, said, or posted. There's no context provided or any justification of why it was included in this article. It sounds like conspiracy theory logic by having you fill in blanks that aren't there. So Rashida Tlaib is being censored. Oh, this other guy's receiving threats to his office, who's leading the charge. It's supposed to make you conclude that these threats were from people who were Rashida Tlaib supporters. The article, and if it's true, that's a bad thing, but the article didn't mention that. So it's like the article's purposely trying to mislead you, but also trying to state they didn't say that these were Rashida Tlaib supporters that threatened the man. I have a problem with this article. I believe the U.S. mainstream media covered the November 2023 vote in the U.S. House of Representatives to censor Rashida Tlaib. They covered that event in such a way to make Rashida Tlaib look worse than she is, when all they had to do was just cite the facts. And it seems like they were trying to stoke fear against Rashida Tlaib. And as part of my belief, I think they were trying to stoke fear of Muslims. I think they're trying to stoke Islamophobia. Now, compare this to how the mainstream media has covered instances in which Donald Trump reposted something on social media that was from a racist or a Nazi or from the KKK. The media simply told the people what Donald Trump posted or reposted, where he got it from, and just it spoke on its own. I mean, Donald Trump's action spoke on its own. Also, I will list another article. It is a list of times Republicans said things worse than Rashida Tlaib but weren't censored. It's by the New Republic. And this just goes to show the mainstream media covers Rashida Tlaib's posting of a video that had a clip in it that's people saying something anti-Semitic, and how much attention that got, and how much other things other people said didn't get attention. It's as if the mainstream media is purposely being Islamophobic. Compare the media's coverage of Rashida Tlaib's censure in November 2023 to its coverage of the anti-BDS laws. So, to give you the context of what these anti-BDS laws are, the BDS movement is a movement to boycott Israel because of its illegal occupation and illegal settlements in the West Bank. The anti-BDS laws are laws to crack down on that movement. So, these usually take two forms. Usually, they will say, if you're a civil servant and you belong to the BDS movement or take part in it, you can be fired from your job simply because you take part in boycotting Israel. The second form is if you're a citizen trying to get government services such as welfare, you can be denied welfare if it's found out that you're part of the BDS movement. These are the anti-BDS laws. If you haven't heard of these anti-BDS laws, I don't blame you. The mainstream media is not really covering them all that well. These laws are being passed around the United States of America at the state level. These laws are scary. So imagine you were fired from your civil servant job because you're a member of the NRA. Imagine if you're denied unemployment or your unemployment check because you're a member of Greenpeace. What's going on here? Our country is bending its laws to suppress a movement that's trying to stand up for Palestinians and to speak out against injustices that are made against Palestinians. These laws also crack down on the right to boycott something. Imagine during the Montgomery bus boycott, if the people boycotting the bus were fired if they were civil servants or denied unemployment or welfare because they were part of that Montgomery bus boycott. Imagine if you're fired because you boycotted Fritos, the company that makes corn chips, for their labor practices. Imagine if you were denied a welfare check because you boycotted Coke for going woke. We should have the right to boycott anything. And these anti-BDS laws crack down on a movement trying to get justice for a Muslim population. And you don't have to agree with it. Go ahead and be against it. Maybe you think that boycotting Israel is the wrong way to go about solving the situation between the Palestinians and the Israelis. That's fine. You don't have to be a part of the movement, but are you willing to sacrifice your rights to suppress the movement? I'm not. And these laws are also anti-capitalistic. Again, like with the Montgomery bus boycott, if you don't like the service the bus company is giving you and that you don't like the way they're treating them, you have a right to boycott their service. Boycotting is about expressing yourself and a demonstration of your free will and consuming what you want in a free market economy. And I find this particularly scary because I am not part of the BDS movement, but I don't go out of my way to buy products from Israel. So if I buy a product on Amazon, I'm not going to go out of my way to buy something from Israel. So where do you draw the line between someone who's boycotting Israel and someone who's just not buying products from Israel because they just don't think about buying a product from Israel? It's not like I'm going to go out of my way to buy something from Israel. Where does the line end with these anti-BDS laws? These anti-BDS laws are scary, but look at how the mainstream media covers them. It's just like, yeah, by the way, you can be fired for, just whatever. Just if you're part of the BDS movement, you can be fired if you're a civil servant or be denied, certain government services. There's a frightening lack of outrage. And then the media's not distorting the facts necessarily. They're just not covering they're not covering these anti-BDS laws in the most normal way, which would be complete fear and paranoia, which is the normal, objective, right way to cover these laws. These laws are scary. And compare it to how they cover the post-October 7th protest that I mentioned earlier in this video, or Rashida Tlaib's comments, which I mentioned earlier in this video. There's definitely a bias where they're not concerned. Basically, the mainstream media is Islamophobic in how they're not covering such authoritarian measures taken to suppress a movement that's attempting to get justice for a Muslim population. Even if you don't agree with the movement, even if you don't think the movement's succeeding in getting justice for a Muslim population, it's at least attempting to. And the fact that the government is not necessarily the federal government, I think these are some more state governments, but still, the fact that there's any government in this country willing to sacrifice the rights of Americans to crack down on a movement that's trying to help Muslims or a Muslim population. It's just, that's scary, and the fact that the mainstream media is not calling it out, that's scary. And that, in my opinion, that's also Islamophobic. Maybe the U.S. mainstream media isn't Islamophobic, but I have to form my opinions based on what I see. I presented in this video to you with what I have seen and why I have drawn the conclusion that the mainstream media in the United States is Islamophobic. Feel free to disagree with me. Feel free to form your own opinions. Just remember, I disable the comments in this video, so your conversations will have to be taken elsewhere. But I do encourage you to have a conversation. And the purpose of the videos that I post on this channel is to stimulate conversations. Anyways, I am the Knight of the Basilisk. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you soon.